What's a fact that sounds like a conspiracy theory?
The Church of Scientology had members secretly infiltrate U.S. government agencies in order to destroy unfavorable documents and investigations into them. Ernest Hemingway suffered from ongoing paranoia that the FBI were surveilling him, which was thought to be a key factor in his suicide. Most chalked it up to mental illness at the time. Decades later, his file was released, proving he was under investigation for his ties to Cuba. His phones were tapped, and he was right all along.
Years ago, in the lead-up to the Olympics in Mexico, the country was embarrassed by massive protests about conditions for regular people there. So at one of the large protests, they put snipers from their CIA equivalent in some tall buildings near where there was due to be a protest by a large government building. That building was guarded by a line of police officers. When the protesters made it to the line of police officers, they continued to peacefully protest. The CIA equivalent officers opened fire on the police, making it appear that the protesters were shooting at the cops. The cops retaliated, mowing down countless protesters, thinking they were defending themselves. Protesters were killed and fled the scene. The government was ready, rushed in, and immediately cleaned up the scene. To this day they have no idea how many people were killed at the scene, and no one knew about the plot to instigate the massacre of the protesters until years later. It worked though. There were no more protests.
In the spring of 1968, President Lyndon Johnson shocked the nation when he announced that he would not seek election to his second full term that November. He gave no explanation, and pretty much everyone assumed that it was because of the situation in Vietnam and his resulting unpopularity. While Vietnam undoubtedly was a factor, it was far from the full story. Concerned that males in his family tended to die young, and having barely survived a heart attack in the 1950s. Sometime in 1967, Johnson had commissioned a top-secret actuarial study to determine his likely lifespan. After carefully going through his family history and medical records, the actuaries concluded that Johnson was unlikely to survive to age 65. Johnson quickly did the math and realized that would give him a very short retirement if he ran, and won in 1968, as he'd be 64 at the end of the term. This led him to decide against running. The actuaries were right, as Johnson never made it to 65, dying at age 64. And indeed, it would have been a very short retirement. Had he served a second full term, he would have died less than 24 hours after the end of the term.
Deleted.
The Pentagon has never been able to account for more than half its budget.
Deleted.
Removed.